Cleansed of the Nazi cancer, Syria settles down again to an ordered way of life. The Commander-in-Chief, General Sir Claude Auchinleck, visits the scene of the recent fascist defeat for a tour of inspection of the area and of the troops stationed there. General Catroux of Free France, now military governor of Syria, doubtless has much to discuss with the Commander-in-Chief. Some of the men who fought in the campaign that successfully checked the vitiation of Syria. Now they remain to hold the country in trust for its people until, with the coming of peace, the Syrians will at last realize their freedom and independence as a sovereign state. Arriving at an East African port, the Empress of Abyssinia reaches the last stage of her journey back to her people, from whom she has been separated for several years. She is accompanied by her daughter, who has been with her during the long period of exile. The Empress took the opportunity of issuing a message in which she paid tribute to the men of the Royal Navy and Mercantile Marine. Under their protection, through all the hazards of a long sea voyage, her return home was made possible. At Nairobi, the Crown Prince, flown by the Royal Air Force from Addis Ababa, greets his mother. For 6 years, the Empress has lived in security under the protection of that great confederation of free peoples, the British Empire, whose armies have played so great a part in the restoration of freedom to her own country. She goes now to take her place at the side of the Emperor Haile Selassie, and with the help of Britain, a new Ethiopia will arise out of the blood and suffering of the past 6 years. His historic meeting with Mr. Roosevelt is over. Now, as the Premier waves in answer to the cheers from American ships, the camera brings you the story of the journey home. Remember how Hitler boasted in the spring of 1941 how he would unloose upon Allied shipping the most terrible storm of destruction. Legions of U-boats would sweep the seas so that no ship sailing beneath the Allied flag could reach port. All honor to the Royal Navy and Air Force. In August 1941, the Prime Minister and his advisors could still make this voyage without incident. Now look ahead one grey morning as they looked on board the Prince of Wales. Stretching across 8 miles of sea is a mighty convoy. Great ships, small ships, cargo boats laden with food and planes and guns and tanks and shells and bullets are on their way to the fortress island of Britain. Tankers brimming over with oil for bombers. Tramps bowed down to the Plimsoll line with pig iron and steel and ore, timber and grain, nickel and manganese. A terrible toll of men and ships the U-boats and Junkers have taken, but while there's a single crew in the Empire, there'll be Empire ships on the sea. Churchill gives the word. The great cavalcade of men-of-war swings into the ocean caravan. The battleship's halyards are hoisting a signal. Churchill wishes you good luck and bon voyage. And the ships reply with a V in Morse. Day, the Prince of Wales making a landfall. Rising out of the water ahead is a bleak and rugged coast, Iceland, home of a friendly nation whose weakness would have made her fair game in the Nazi hunt for world dominion. But Britain stepped in first. Empire troops have been stationed in this Arctic outpost of civilization and making Iceland a fortress too. Recently, Roosevelt sent Americans to share with the Allies the job of keeping Iceland safe from German invasion. On landing, we shall see those Americans here on guard. In Reykjavik, Mr. Churchill meets the service chiefs in charge and inspects sailors and soldiers and airmen. The Premier speaks to the Icelanders from the balcony of the Regency. He is greeted with smiles and cheers that acclaim him the champion of liberty for all men. Outside the Regency, he inspects American Marines and afterwards chats with the men and women who have made the Allied troops so welcome. On his journey back to Britain, Mr. Churchill was accompanied by Ensign Roosevelt, who now stands beside him at the saluting base for the march past. First, the Marines. Now the Royal Navy. Norway and the Army. The Royal Australian Air Force. The visit to Iceland is over. Leaving on the last leg of his journey of thousands of miles, Britain's Prime Minister says goodbye. And goodbye to Iceland's Premier. So, back to the ship which has been his home during these tremendous days. There are no incidents on the voyage. The Nazi bombers keep clear. But just to keep their hand in, the Navy's ack-ack gunners indulge in target practice. So dawns the day when they are safe in port again somewhere in Britain, and the Premier speaks to the ship's company on the deck of Prince of Wales.
On your first cruise, you met the Bismarck, and on your second, you met the illustrious President of the United States, who is one of the men who will take the greatest part in shaping the immediate future of our civilization. I think you will feel that you have taken part in these important events, and that may be an interest to you when the full story can be made known, and when the full story of this hard, stern war is told.
Mr. Churchill travelled overnight from the north. On the platform at King's Cross, Mrs. Churchill is awaiting him with America's ambassador, John D. Wynant. And this is the welcome they give him in London. Within a few hours of his return, the Premier calls a cabinet meeting. Ministers attend to hear the secret report of that historic meeting with the President. Later, Mr. Churchill goes to Buckingham Palace to deliver to the King a letter from Mr. Roosevelt. And so it ends, back to routine again. Renewed vigor to the job of being the busiest man in the world. And we can draw breath from the rush of travel and pause to consider what it has all meant. It's really quite simple. America believes that no man has the right to make a slave of any human being. The Allies believe that too, and they're fighting for their belief. To all enslaved nations and to themselves who live today in the shadow of death, they are pledged. No peace without victory, and this time with God's help, really peace.